What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Cricket Magic 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G. Now, as always, if you end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Cricket Magic 5G, we're getting a 6.6-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 286, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. With the Samsung Galaxy A13, we're getting a 6.6-inch PLS LCD display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 400, and a 20:9 aspect ratio as well. So on one hand, the size and dimensions are basically exactly the same, both being 6.6 inches with 20:9 aspect ratios. But with the A13, because it has a 1080p resolution versus only 720p with the Cricket Magic 5G, the image is quite a bit sharper, and it just looks nicer in general. So if you're doing stuff like watching videos, for example, where the image quality is a bit more important, then between the two, the A13 will be a much better choice. But if you're really not doing a ton on your phone, maybe you're watching the occasional video but mostly doing stuff like reading or browsing the web, where the image quality doesn't matter quite as much, then the Cricket Magic 5G will still at least get the job done. Now for storage, both phones have 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so for the purpose of this video they are even, but keep in mind, with the A13, I believe a lot of US variants only have 32GB, which in my opinion is really not enough. So if that is the case, I honestly can't remember what it is for Cricket, but just keep in mind in that situation, of course, the Cricket Magic 5G will have an advantage. But even then, if you really want the A13, you can find an unlocked version that has 64 anyway, so you should be fine either way. Also keep in mind, in case you don't know, 64GB is a pretty decent amount of storage. Sure, if you're really a power user and you're constantly downloading like apps and games and stuff like that, you might want to get something that has 128, but I feel like for the average user looking for a more entry-level phone, the storage we get with these phones will be perfectly fine. For security features, both phones have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners too. With the Cricket Magic 5G, it's right here on the back, and with the Samsung Galaxy A13, it's on the power key. But starting with the Cricket Magic 5G, let's give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Samsung. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners worked real well, no issues at all. And again, remember, both phones have Face Unlock too, so definitely nice to get that flexibility. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Cricket Magic 5G, up front, we got a 5MP selfie camera, then on the back, we got a dual camera setup, with a 13MP main camera and a 2MP depth sensing camera. With the Samsung Galaxy A13, up front, we got an 8MP selfie camera, then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 50MP main camera, a 5MP ultra wide camera, a 2MP macro camera, and a 2MP depth sensing camera. So when it comes to features, the Samsung does have the clear advantage here, having both an ultra wide camera and a macro camera, whereas with the Cricket Magic 5G, although it does at least have portrait mode, it really doesn't have a whole lot else. So if you are looking for something that has a bit more in the way of camera features, the A13 will of course be a much better choice. Now to give you an idea of what they can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the Cricket Magic 5G. So overall, for what it is, I do think the photo quality is pretty good, so if you're looking for a phone that doesn't necessarily have a ton of camera features, but can still take decent photos when you need it to, I do think the Cricket Magic 5G will get the job done. But if the camera is really more of a priority for you, then you can definitely do better. And then here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A13, and between the two I would say the quality here is significantly better. So if you are on one hand still looking for a more affordable phone, but you are taking a lot of pictures and the camera is a bit more important to you, then definitely go with the Samsung because, as you can probably tell by these pictures, the camera here is really better in every way. Now for the RAM and processor, with the Cricket Magic 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor, and with the Samsung Galaxy A13, we're getting 4GB of RAM here as well, with the Exynos 850 processor. Now when it comes to performance, this is one area where the Cricket Magic 5G has a huge advantage, because between the two, when you're doing really pretty much anything with them, the Magic 5G will be significantly faster. On the other hand, with the A13, Honestly, this is a pretty slow phone, so definitely don't expect too much from it. It's really made for super basic activities like browsing the web, using social media, maybe watching the occasional video, and then playing some simple mobile games, stuff like that. So if you're really just consuming content, watching videos, looking at photos, stuff like that, then especially because of the display, I would say the A13 will be a better choice, and it will be great for that kind of activity. But if you're really going to be on your phone a lot, especially doing maybe slightly more demanding activities, like lots of mobile gaming for example, or maybe you just want 5G connectivity, then in that case, the Cricket Magic 5G will be a better choice. Because again, keep in mind, the Samsung Galaxy A13 in my hand is not the A13 5G. That is a completely phone that, at this point, I feel like is pretty much irrelevant now. But for some reason, when it comes to the 4G version of this phone, despite the A14 4G being out and having been out for a while now, for some reason in the US at least, it's still really not much of a thing. So the A13 4G is still being offered by most US carriers, so definitely keep that in mind. But yeah, in general, if you do want the faster phone between the two, the Cricket Magic 5G will have an advantage, because in my experience, the A13 4G is really not fast at all. Now for the batteries, with the Cricket Magic 5G, we're getting a 4000 mAh battery that supports 10W fast charging, and with the Samsung Galaxy A13, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 15W fast charging. So clearly here, the Samsung Galaxy A13 does have a significantly better battery, so if battery life and longevity is important to you, definitely keep this in mind. But also keep in mind with the Cricket Magic 5G, for daily normal use, the battery is really not bad either, so while obviously the A13 will be a better choice if you really care that much about the battery, and you want to maximize what you can get from it. If you're really just looking for something that's going to get you through the day, but you don't really need a whole lot more than that, the Cricket Magic 5G will still at least be okay. Now for the software, both phones do have Android 13, but keep in mind on one hand with the Cricket, I've personally never seen a Cricket phone get a major update before, so if you're hoping to get Android 14, keep in mind with the Cricket Magic 5G, that's probably not going to happen. It's not impossible that they change it and actually do give it the update, but again, I find it pretty unlikely. But on the other hand, with the Samsung Galaxy A13, I imagine this phone will be getting Android 14 in a few months, so if long-term software support is important to you, the A13 will have an advantage. Also keep in mind, the Cricket Magic 5G does have NFC, and with the Samsung Galaxy A13, I'm pretty sure it does too, but as you can see in my settings, this phone in my hand does not have NFC. But keep in mind, this specific Samsung Galaxy A13 is the unlocked version that is the international version, and I've heard that at least the Metro version of the A13 has NFC, so I'm assuming the Cricket one does too, so if you really do care about the feature, definitely check before you actually buy it, but I'm pretty sure that for most people watching this video, the version of the A13 4G that you would get would have NFC, but for whatever reason this one doesn't, so just keep in mind, with the Samsung Galaxy A13, for some reason there are lots of variants out there, and while a lot of them, in fact most of them for that matter, do actually have NFC, there are some that don't. So again, if you are considering this phone and specifically looking for NFC, definitely check the specific one you're getting before you actually buy it. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Now, despite the Cricket Magic 5G being a 5G phone, whereas obviously the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G is not, this is actually pretty close. Because on one hand, if performance is really important to you, you want a faster phone with 5G connectivity, and maybe you want to make sure you get more internal storage, then in that case, the Cricket Magic 5G will have an advantage. Because again, remember, while this A13 4G in my hand does have 64GB of internal storage, I know this phone has some variants offered by US carriers that only has 32, so I can't remember off the top of my head if that does include the Cricket version, but I'm pretty sure it does, so there is a chance that if you get this phone directly from Cricket, you are only going to get 32GB, which again, in my opinion, that is really hardly any storage. So that is something to think about. Whereas like I said with the Cricket Magic 5G, we are getting an entire 64GB, which granted isn't really a ton of storage, but I feel like for most people looking for more of an entry-level phone like these, it is at least acceptable. All this said though, despite the Cricket Magic 5G having the advantage when it comes to performance and potentially storage too, the A13 4G does have a significantly better display, so if you're watching videos and playing games and stuff like that, this will definitely make a difference. It also has a much better camera that not only has more features, but also better photo quality, and the software support with the A13 is much better too. So in general, as you can see, they are pretty close and each one does have some specific advantages, and one that I almost forgot about is the A13 4G again does have a much larger battery too, so that is something to consider. But overall, if you want the faster phone with 5G connectivity, the Cricket Magic 5G will be the way to go. But if you want a better display, larger battery, better software support, and a nicer camera, then the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G will be a better choice. But this concludes my comparison between the Cricket Magic 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A13 4G. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.